All right, so let's get started with Angular. So what is it? It's a Typescript open source web framework to render single page applications. So what's a single page application? So you might be familiar with HTML, and typically HTML you can link pages from one to another by having hyperlinks. If you click on one page, it navigates to some other page, and you can have multiple views and whatnot like that. In a single page application is dramatically different in that you only ever have one single page, right? Hence the name single page application. And you never actually leave that page. Instead, you use JavaScript dynamically to go fetch more content and then use that content to render dynamically the new content, right? Given the illusion of navigating from one portion of the application to another portion of the application, right? But instead of throwing away the entire content of the page, you only render pieces of the content as strategically whenever you need to. Okay? And that's exactly what we're going to be doing, right? This is the modern way of building web applications today. Google. I mean, a lot of folks were started using it at the beginning of the century, but Google definitely pioneered a lot of this. One of the first single page applications that I ever used was Google Maps. Before using Google Maps, I used to use MapQuest. Anybody remember MapQuest? Anybody ever used MapQuest? No? Well, see. So MapQuest did exactly the same thing as Google Maps, but you have buttons on every corner. And if you wanted to pan left or pan right, you would click a button, and the entire page would re-render with a new version of the map, but slightly to the right or slightly to the left or slightly to the top or side. Which this was the most the most modern way of building applications back then. It was dynamic. It was dynamic HTML, right? The big difference here was that the dynamic portion of it lived on the server. The server recalculated the entire page and re-rendered the entire thing, right? It was jarring. The experience was, it was okay until Google Maps came around and showed us an alternative way of doing it. It had exactly the same the same use cases. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can pan left, pan right. You can search for places. You can plot directions. So it did exactly the same thing. But it used this legacy way of rendering content. Google came and says, well, no, we're not going to re-render everything. Instead, the only portion of the entire user interface that changes is the map. Everything else, right? Any menus, anything on the left-hand side, the bottom, that doesn't need to render. I don't need to go fetch that again. I'll only fetch the images that make up the map. Right? So that allowed them to completely come up with a completely different way of interacting, right? Where you can direct manipulation. You can grab the map, jiggle around and move it and just flick it, right? And as you flicked it, they gave you the animation of kind of like gravity and like inertia, right? And what they did is that they would send many queries back to the server asking for new images, right? On the back end of the browser. They used a thread to go fetch new images, and they would fill in the empty spaces, right? Giving you the illusion that you were manipulating a humongous amount of data, but they only showed you a small subset of it, obviously, right? But it gave you the illusion of being able to manipulate the entire world, right? Even zooming out and zooming out in and whatnot, they give you the illusion of this, which was great and obviously worked very well for them. This is how most applications are built today. Right, where these are single-page applications, and we go back to the server only for the snippets of data that we need, right, and then render only those small pieces that we need to update. So Angular and React and all these new web frameworks are designed to build applications this way, okay, and Angular in particular. All right, so to get started, we'll need to, now that we've installed Node, we have the Node command line and we have npm, right? Node Package Manager allows us to install other things In particular, we'll install Angular's command line interface. Right, so we already have Mongo, we already have Node. We'll install the Angular's command line interface. So the command line interface will allow us to create a boilerplate application, right? So that we don't have to get started from scratch, right? It'll create a dummy application which will be good enough for us to get started, right? An Angular application, so that we don't have to do all this. So what these new frameworks do also very nicely is that they bring a lot of what we've learned on server side, like singleton patterns, right? We use singletons for the DAOs, right? We use web services, right, to expose data and provide an interface for interacting with data. Yes. So all these ideas that have flourished and matured over the years on the server side, that have been staples of server-side programming for quite a while. So those same ideas, those same design patterns, have slowly migrated also to the client-side development side. And, it used to be that you would use JavaScript for simple things like quick animations, maybe simple form validation, right? But more and more, folks have been using JavaScript to build even larger applications, and larger, more complex applications. So the JavaScript language, all by itself, it's not a real. It doesn't have object orientation. It doesn't have, it doesn't have inheritance. It doesn't have a lot of the things that we would expect in full-blown programming languages, right? So what these frameworks have done, Angular, React, and many of these, is create some of the same abstractions that we have come to learn and love on the server side, like injection, auto-wired, right? Being able to just ask for a service and immediately gets injected. Inversion of control, singleton patterns, and all those patterns are now also available on the client, right? On JavaScript. But JavaScript all by itself cannot do this because that's just not part of the language, right? So what these frameworks have done is that they've created their own version of an idealized version of JavaScript, right? If I could reinvent JavaScript new, what would it look like? Okay, and so they did just that. So what they're doing is that they're using another language called Typescript. Typescript was invented by Microsoft. And it's a better JavaScript. All the things that were missing from JavaScript are now here. Things that we take for granted in object-oriented programming languages, like inheritance, implementing interfaces, inversion of control, injection, singleton patterns. All these great things that are commonplace in Java and .NET and all these other frameworks are now available on the front end, which is awesome. But none of the browsers understand TypeScript. Right? None of the browsers understand these high-level JavaScript. So what they typically do is that they compile these high-level abstractions to low-level JavaScript that the browsers can actually understand. Okay. So any data model that we're creating, any classes, any inheritance, any injection, or anything we create, it's actually compiled down to a very dumb implementation of JavaScript that current browsers can actually interpret and execute. Okay? But that's going to be done for us automatically. We don't have to handle that. We can stay up here at TypeScript. All right? All right. So I've already done that. I have that already. Let's do this piece. We'll create a simple Angular application. Let's do that. Let me close some of this stuff. Let's see. Looks like we have MongoD running already. So let's leave that. We have Mongo running already. Let's leave that too. Let's stop this. Looks like I had something going on there. Where are we? So let's go to CS 52200. Go to 2008. We'll go to fall. And we'll go to section 2. And we'll create our first Angular application. So because we're going to be interacting with this movie database, I'll create a directory for that, omdb. And so let's go in there. There's nothing in there. We'll create the client first, and we'll create the server later. Okay, if we'll first play around with the client, we'll play with the server after the break. Okay, so let's create, we'll use ng. Let's see, what is it? ng new, and this will be an omdb client, and this will be in an Angular client. And this is for section for fall 18, and this is section 2. Okay, actually, let me put that in first. So this is fall 18 and section 2. All right, so that's going to download a couple of things. It's going to compile a couple of things and make it available for us to get started. Meanwhile, let's open up our favorite IDE. And let's open up that application we just built. So open. And this is CS5200, fall to that section 2, omdb, and that's the client. All right, so that's our client. We're going to spend most of our time under src, under source. All right, so this is already a running application. Let's run it. Let's see what it looks like. We can go in there, so MDB, and we can get started. We can run it using ng start, right? And we can say open in a browser. Once you start it, open in a browser. All right, it'll compile and oops. ng serve. Sorry, I think it's ng serve. There it is. So this is our boilerplate application. We're not going to use any of this. We'll throw it away. But this is what they give you to get started. All right? Okay. All right. Excellent. Let's now that we have something running, let's get up and running. Okay. So we have welcome to app. Excellent. Let's install a couple of CSS style sheets so that this will look a little bit better, more presentable, right? So that it doesn't look as ugly as it's rendering right now. So to do that, there's a couple ways. I'll do it the simplest way. I'm just going to install Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a CSS style sheet that just makes it a little prettier. You know, nicer fonts, nicer margins, nicer paddings. Also, it renders our forms a little prettier, our buttons a little prettier, our input fields prettier. Font Awesome is a font that allows you to have all sorts of symbols like trash cans and and X's and all sorts of icons that we can use. So I'm going to install that. I'm going to open up a new tab so that I can run this. So I'll install Bootstrap. So that's going to download that. And also now I'm going to do the same thing with Font Awesome. So while that's downloading, that's being all downloaded and compiled into the node modules directory. So it's a local directory in our project where all these libraries are being installed. So for instance, Bootstrap should be somewhere here. There's Bootstrap. And the content that we need, it's under the dist directory, CSS and JavaScript. So we'll take the CSS. And Font Awesome, same thing. Where's Font Awesome? Somewhere in here. Font awesome. Where are you? Maybe it didn't refresh. Probably didn't refresh. There it is, font awesome. So we'll need also what's under CSS and fonts. So we'll copy those two things. All right, so let me copy those two things. Copy. And I'm going to move them into assets. Assets is everything that's static. Any images, anything that's static text files. So I'm going to paste it in there. So we'll paste the CSS, and we'll paste any font images will be there too. And we're going to do the same thing for Bootstrap. Let's copy from Bootstrap. Where are you? Bootstrap. There we go. I'm going to copy CSS, just the CSS. We don't really need anything else. And again, I'll copy it into the assets folder. Paste. There we go. All right, excellent. I think we have everything we need. To load that, we're going to load everything into index page. Index page is the entry point, the single page application. This is the single page, index.html. Notice that it's completely empty. So you might say, where is all this stuff? The image, the text over here, all these links, where is it? I don't see anything. Right? It's almost empty. Right? And that's the whole point, that this was dynamically rendered using this magic that we're going to learn today, right? That after the fact, after index gets loaded, which is empty at first, right, it dynamically renders the rest of the content, right? And we'll learn how to do that in a minute. But nevertheless, we're here. We're going to load that. We're going to link and load the style sheet that we just loaded from Bootstrap, which is located in assets. In CSS, in Bootstrap, there it is. We'll load the Bootstrap, there it is. And same thing with the fonts. We're going to load the fonts. And that's in assets. And what do we have here? CSS. Font awesome, there it is. That's all we need. There we go. All right, so if we go here, notice that already looks a little prettier, right? It's better fonts. Before it was Time Romans, right? So instead now it's Helvetica and something else. Anyway, we're not going to use any of this content. This content is actually being rendered by these tags here that are not HTML. You know, they look like HTML, but they're not, right? Basically, what Angular and React and all these frameworks allow you to do is build your own tags, right? Build your own components. So if you click on that, it takes you to some code that runs, that executes when the framework sees these two tags. This is, what the heck is that? Well, if you go in there, it's this component thing. This component is declaring that the HTML content should be this, the style should be that, and that some variable named title should have a value of app. If you go to the HTML, there's the content that we were seeing before. See that? The welcome to, the image, a couple of links, which is exactly what you see here. Right? So again, what happens here is you have the app root. App root is somehow tied to this JavaScript, this Typescript thing that configures where does the HTML come from and some data. Right? And the HTML content, somehow it's rendered, and somehow the data here can be referenced from the HTML. So that this title variable is this app here. See that? So welcome to app, it's welcome to title, where the title is this variable that has a value there. See that? Everybody okay? All right, there's this component that ties everything together, the HTML and the data. HTML and data. Everybody good? You're still with me? All right. But we don't want any of that. So we're just going to throw away app root. We don't want any of this content. Gone. There's nothing there. So my page is now empty. So I can type here anything I want now. welcome to CS 5200. Right, so this content is what gets rendered. So that's my entry point. App root is my entry point. Yes? Right, here's where I'm going to put my stuff. Right, where we're going to put some interface that interacts with OMDB. Okay? That's my entry point. Everybody still with me? Did I lose anybody yet? You know, stop me if you get lost. All right. So we'll backtrack and play around with this some more. All right. So that's the welcome screen. Let's get going. Let's keep going. All right. So first we'll create a model. You know, something we know how to do. Okay. Let's work on that.